Good morning. Today is an historic day because in a few hours we will welcome Finland as the 31st member of our alliance. This will make Finland safer and NATO stronger. And on this very day in 1949, the Washington Treaty, NATO's founding treaty, was signed in Washington. And it's hard to imagine any better way of celebrating our anniversary than to have Finland becoming a full member of the alliance. NATO's foreign ministers meet at a pivotal time for our security. We see that President Putin's war of aggression against Ukraine grinds on. We'll meet in the NATO-Ukraine Commission with Foreign Minister Kuleba, where we will address how to sustain and ramp up support from NATO and NATO allies to Ukraine, both the urgent needs, but also I expect that allies will start to develop a more long-term multi-year program to assist and support Ukraine, to help them develop interoperability with NATO allies, move from Soviet-era standards, doctrines to NATO standards, and then move closer to the Euro-Atlantic family. We will tomorrow in our session then address a wide range of different security challenges, including those emanating from the Middle East and North Africa, including the fight against terrorism. We will discuss how to invest more in defense, and I expect that when allies meet at the summit in Vilnius later on, allies will agree to have a more ambitious defense investment pledge where we regard 2% of GDP for defense, not as a ceiling, but as a floor, a minimum that we need to spend in a more dangerous world on our security. And then we will also meet with our Asia-Pacific partners, New Zealand, Australia, Japan and South Korea. Security is not regional, security is global. What happens in Europe matters for the Indo-Pacific, for Asia, and what happens in Asia matters for Europe. And the war in Ukraine really demonstrates that with all its global ramifications. And also when we see that China and Russia are coming more and more closely, that they stand together, work together, it makes it even more obvious that we need to stand together with our partners in the Indo-Pacific. And with that, I'm ready to take your questions.
Secretary General Lord Cook from the Associated Press, Russia said yesterday that it's ready to bolster its presence around Finland. If NATO decides it's going to do something to send in more troops, is this something that NATO's considering? What can we expect in coming weeks and perhaps months in terms of exercises and other things that might be seen as potentially a provocation?
So first of all, what we have seen over many years is a Russian military buildup, also in the north, close to Finland, to Norway. And this has taken place over many years in the Kola Peninsula, in the Arctic. And we have not only seen a Russian military buildup, but we've also seen that Russia is willing, and President Putin is willing to use military force against neighbors. Georgia in 2008, then Crimea in 2014, and then the full-fledged invasion of Ukraine last year. So this is part of a pattern, and that's exactly why we have strengthened NATO, our readiness, our presence in the eastern part of the alliance, and why NATO allies are investing more also in new modern capabilities. And it was actually the invasion of Ukraine last year that led to the decision by Finland and Sweden to apply for a NATO membership. And it just demonstrates that when President Putin had as a declared goal of the invasion of Ukraine to get less NATO. He wanted less NATO along his borders. He wanted to close NATO's door, no more NATO membership for any more countries in Europe. He's getting exactly the opposite. He's getting more troops, more readiness, more forces, land, sea and air, in the eastern part of the alliance, and he's getting more members, Sweden today, and soon also Finland today, and soon also Sweden will become a full-fledged member of the alliance. Then we are constantly assessing our posture, our presence. We have more exercises, we have more presence also in the Nordic area, but again, this is something which is part of a pattern that NATO has already responded to.
Mr. Stoltenberg, what does this mean personally to you? Is this sort of an emotional highlight for your term? And secondly, can you really celebrate when Sweden is not ready to join yet?
So I'm glad and I'm proud to be the Secretary General that can welcome Finland as a full-fledged member of the alliance. This is important for NATO, it's important for Finland, it's important not least for the Nordic region and the Baltic region. You can just look at the map and understand how important Finland is for the security in the Nordic and the Baltic region. And then also, of course, Finland brings high-end capabilities, substantial forces, and also advanced defense industry into the alliance. But personally, I'm also glad because I'm from Norway. I've worked with Finland and Finnish politicians and leaders for many, many years. And of course, not so many years ago, we thought it was unthinkable that Finland would become a member. Now they are a full-fledged member of our alliance. And that is truly historic and something that demonstrates that Finland is a sovereign, independent country. They make their own decisions. And NATO is an alliance of democracies with an open door to democratic sovereign nations as Finland.
Will the security guarantees of NATO now apply 100% to Finland, and what will the difference between Finland and Sweden be in this regard?
Well, what happens today is that Finland becomes a full-fledged member of the alliance. And that means, of course, that they will now participate fully as a member in all NATO meetings, activities, military structures, command structure, and all parts of NATO civilian and military structures. But of course, most importantly, is that by becoming a member, Finland will get an ironclad security guarantee. Article 5, our collective defense clause, one for all for one, will now from today apply for Finland. Then of course this is something that builds on what has happened over the last year. Because when NATO allies, when the heads of state and government at the summit in Madrid in June last year decided to invite Finland and Sweden, then both Finland and Sweden came in a much stronger and much better position towards NATO than before. So also Sweden, which is not yet a full-fledged member, is in a very closer and much better position. As an invitee, they participate in NATO meetings. They are integrating into NATO structures. We are developing capability targets, taking account for also Sweden when we do defense planning. So Sweden is also very close to NATO, but of course they haven't that final ratification by all allies, and therefore not a full-fledged member. Let me also add on Sweden, and you actually also had a question about Sweden, is that, of course, it is a great day to have Finland as a member. But we will ensure that also Sweden will become a full member. And we have to remember that all allies agreed to invite them, and all allies have signed the accession protocol. What remains when it comes to Sweden is the ratification in two parliaments. I'm confident that will happen. I met with President Erdogan some weeks ago. I also spoke with him on the phone recently, and we agreed, of course, first of all, to ensure that Finland becomes a full member, that the accession process is now finalized for Finland. But we also agreed to restart the process, the meetings of the permanent mechanism, the meetings of Finland, Sweden, and Turkey, to ensure also that we can make progress on the ratification of Sweden. So Sweden is in a much better place now than before they applied, and we will continue to work hard to ensure that we can finalize the ratification process also for Sweden.
Two questions to follow up on the question before. On most of the countries on the eastern flank, there are also troops from other countries. Will there be troops from other countries also in Finland? And the second question, how can NATO be more safe by having a much longer border with Russia? Thank you.
It is Finnish decision whether they would like to have any. There will be no NATO troops in Finland without the consent of Finland. And of course, what we have in many countries is that we have exercises, we have naval and air presence and so on, but we don't have permanent bases. And this has not been an issue so far in our discussions with Finland. Then the last. Well, the reality is that this is a result of President Putin's war aggression against Ukraine. And of course, Finland also has a history that tells them about the brutality that a war can afflict on a country, like they now see in Ukraine, and like Finland saw during the Winter War in 1939-1940. And therefore, when they saw that President Putin didn't not only threaten Ukraine, but actually threatened every nation in Europe that wanted to make their own decisions on joining NATO or not, then Finland decided to join the alliance. And NATO becomes stronger, Finland becomes safer by belonging to an alliance where we guarantee the security of all allies. The purpose of NATO's deterrence and defense is not to provoke a conflict, it is to prevent the conflict. And any misunderstanding, any miscalculation is dangerous. And by becoming a full-fledged member, we are removing the room for miscalculation in Moscow about NATO's readiness to protect Finland, and that makes Finland safer and NATO stronger and all of us safer.
He already asked my question.
Sergei Pelesa, Belsa TV. I have a feeling that the NATO's reaction on the Putin's declarations about potential nuclear weapon in Belarus is quite moderate. Don't you think this is a serious threat or just aggressive rhetoric?
President Putin's nuclear rhetoric over the last year, and also before the invasion actually, is dangerous and reckless. And we have made that clear again and again. We also made it clear that a nuclear war can not be won and should never be fought. We, of course, and NATO remains a nuclear alliance, and that's part of our, an essential part of our deterrence and defense. And of course, we closely monitor what Russia does. And so far, we haven't seen any changes in Russia's nuclear posture that requires any changes in our posture. But we remain vigilant, we monitor closely what they do, and we will take the necessary steps to always ensure that we have credible deterrence for all allies. And again, this is not about provoking conflict, this is about preserving peace, preventing misunderstanding, miscalculations in Moscow about our readiness to protect all allies. Because together, NATO allies represent 50% of the world's military might. So as long as we stand together and protect each other and do that in a credible way, then there will be no military attack against a NATO ally.
Thank you very much, colleagues. This concludes this press point, and we'll see you later in the day.
Thank you.